Good morning, everyone. I'm Angel from Lima, Peru, and this is my channel, Reading Means Life. Some months ago, I set a challenge, the Mario Vargas Llosa challenge, because the 2019 edition of the International Book Fair here in Lima is going to have Mario Vargas Llosa as the guest of honor, right? And well, unfortunately, I was the first one who did not follow that challenge, right? However, in the last month, I have started at last, okay, to read some books by him. One of them is Death in the Andes. Right? Another one is The Time of the Hero, right? And Conversation in the Cathedral. I have also finished reading Captain Pantoja and the Special Service. So this is the novel that I want to talk to you about, right? This book was published in 1993, so this is the first novel that he wrote after the failure, after he didn't succeed, at becoming the president of Peru in the 1990s. So it was published in 1993. It has 247 pages in the English edition, right? It was published in Great Britain in 1996. The name is Lituma in Los Andes. Lituma, well, I understand that Lituma is his son. He was a corporal, right? That's the name, a corporal, who is a non-commissioned office of low rank in the army, okay, courtesy of Macmillan Dictionary, right? Yes, corporal, that's the name. And he had a subordinate who was a civil guard called Tomás Carreño. Tomás Carreño was from the Andes, and Corporal Lituma was from the coast, the region of Piura. Well, for those who perhaps don't know the many frictions and conflicts that people in my country have, I can tell you just in a sentence that there is a kind of resentment and mutual distrust, okay, between people from the coast and people from the Andes. You know that Cusco was the capital of the Tahuantinsuyo, is in the Andes, and Lima is the capital of Peru nowadays, and it's on the coast. People from the coast usually discriminate people from the Andes, and people from and Highlanders, feel resentful. Okay, they suspect, okay, that a criollo, who is a person from the coast, tends to deceive them usually. So he was sent to a town in the region of Junín. I think it's a fictional town, to be honest. It is called Najos. That that town had been economically important in olden times, but at that moment it was in a terrible decadence. Many people had abandoned the town, and the whole area had been affected by terrorism. You know that Shining Path, that terrorist group, affected our country in the 1980s and 1990s. This book is set in the 1990s, and in that frame, or within that frame of terrorism and fighting against that, Corporal Lituma wants, or is obsessed at trying to find the truth of the disappearance of three men. One of them was Tinoco, right? Pedro Tinoco, I think, right? Who was an Opa. Opa is a Quechua term that means stupid, a fool, right? He couldn't speak, and he lived with the Vicuñas in a national reserve. The other was an albino man who was called Casimiro Huarcaya. He said that he was a pistaco, right? And he was a kind of trader, right? He made commerce from town to town in the Andes. And the other was Demetrio Changa, whose real name was Medardo Liantac. He had been the mayor of a town, I think in Apurimac, to be honest. No, in Ayacucho, right? In Andamarca. The Andean region is especially the central and southern area of the Andes, Ayacucho, Huancavelica, Apurímac, Junín, right? So there were many versions. Those people were killed by the terrorists, or perhaps they were sacrificed to the Apus. Apus are the spirits of the mountains, the gods that pre-Hispanic Peruvians had, and many of them have survived in a kind of mixture with Catholicism. So that this is one of the aspects in which Mario Vargas Llosa has been kind of criticized, because some people perceive a kind of discrimination towards people from the Andes. Okay, the idea of the community, the idea of becoming modern in order to survive. Um, of course, in the words of Corporal Ituma, there are many offensive expressions towards Highlanders. Okay, the Serranos. He called them serruchos, which is a derogatory word. Okay, that means Highlanders. It's playing with the word Serranos, right? So another parallel story that perhaps has nothing to do with the serious aspect is Mercedes and Careñito, or Tomasito, the subordinate of Corporal Ituma. Mercedes was, I didn't understand if she was a prostitute, but I think she was kind of, let's consider her an exotic dancer. And she was hired by a superior, okay, of Tomasito, to accompany him in the Amazonia to have some kind of sadomasochist games. So he was supposedly hitting her, and this is why Carreñito was so jealous that he killed, okay, el chancho, okay, the pig, okay, which is how he calls him, or how that superior was called. Then they escape, but they are followed. In the end, they kind of survive. Right? She left him because she didn't love him. Okay, one of the friends of Carreñitos told him, women don't like being treated kindly. Okay, they prefer, or they would rather be treated as she was at the beginning, right? With some, some kind of violence. In that way, they will be quiet and obedient. Okay, so the book mentions those ideas, those male chauvinists ideas, but of course we can, or we should understand the context. Okay, military men. Okay, that's the traditional way in which they see women, or they see rural people. The terrorists are portrayed as they really were: cruel people, fanatics. They preferred to destroy the little thing that was being built in our country, let's say roads, kill the vicuñas in a national reserve, murdering scientists. There was a woman who reminded me of a real woman who was terribly murdered by Shining Path in the 1990s, I think, Barbara Aquile. But they called her, I don't know if she's the same woman, but they called her with another name. A couple of French tourists had the same destiny, the same fate, and there were some kind of popular trials. It was something that in reality the terrorists performed from town to town. They judged and they sentenced all the bad elements of society, let's say homosexuals, people who, witches, let's say witches, superstitious people, cheaters, and people who sold alcohol. And there were two very important characters that in the end didn't have a good relationship with Corporal Ituma, but at the beginning, sorry, but in the end they established, okay, a kind of friendship with him, Adriana and Dionisio. Right, they had a kind of bar, the only bar in the town, and something tragicomic is that they were expecting to be killed. Okay, so they um, wonder, when are the terrorists going to kill us? Okay, what are they waiting for? In the end, it was discovered that it was the people who had sacrificed the three missing men, and there were that those kind of beliefs that come from pre-Hispanic Peru, that endemic violence did not necessarily start with terrorism. Uh, I don't know if the author implies that terrorism was an effect or a product of that violence, but At least I understood that it is implied. Okay, so much violence in our country through pre-Hispanic years, to the colony, to the republic, in which we had not created a nation, and those beliefs persisted. Those beliefs are portrayed as, perhaps inappropriate or not civilized. And that is one of the aspects in which Mr. Vargas Llosa has been heavily criticized. Well, I really recommend reading this book. This is the third novel that I have read by him. The prose is fantastically realistic, because this is the way in which men usually tell each other their secrets, the way in which military men usually refer to others that they consider perhaps inferior. And even though the aspect of the love story between Cariñito and Mercedes might be or might seem not to fit well in the frame of terrorism, violence, and trying to investigate some disappearance, it worked, in my opinion. Right? Mario Vargas Llosa continues with the typical style of him, that is, mixing chapters, okay, so that we can see parallel stories there. But he does it in such a way that is really enjoyable. And I didn't know that he had tried to make some stories and some names fit with Greek mythology. Adriana is Ariadna. I don't know how to call it in English. I'm sorry. Timoteo, Adriana's first husband, is Teseo, or Theseus, I suppose. Dionisio is the gods. Okay, and that troupe, that of artists, dancers, and musicians that went from town to town, also resembles those Greek stories. If I hadn't read anything about that on the internet, I wouldn't have noticed that, which is another evidence of how convincing that story is. Well, I really recommend it. I give it 5 of 5, of course. It is my second best novel so far, after Captain Pantoja and Special Service, of which I will prepare a video review very, very soon. Bye bye.